recording again. Okay, here we go. All right, and then we'll go find our slides for today. I'll share my screen. I always feel so much pressure. Like whenever I start these classes, I'm like, okay, we have an hour, we have all these things to do. And then there's no social component to this class. If we had a 3-hour studio class, we would have had a social component. We would have had, beer, wine, we would have casually talked. And yeah, Tara knows, right? Like we kind of like had more hangout time in the class, but we don't online. So
yeah, like the good old days when everything is normal.
When there were people inside the room together.
Like actual physical people.
That's right. Okay. You young kids, you know nothing today in your own little bubbles. Whatever. Okay. Onwards. Oh, this is totally the wrong PDF. Okay. That's no good. Where did my PDF go? Oh, I posted entirely the wrong PDF. How about that? Nobody noticed? Oh, wait, no, this is because the stream is not updated. And there it is. Okay, sorry, that was strange. So the stream was out of date, and so I picked the first. All right, whatever. You want to hear my sob story? Oh, I did it again. I just want to figure out the wrong slides. Okay, here we go. I promise it will work this time. Okay. And it's not class 10. I still made a mistake. It's class 11. Okay, whatever. What are avatars? What are avatars? So looking at our definition, right? The metaverse is synchronously shared and persistent three-dimensional context. We've spent a fair amount of time in that three-dimensional context. You have built, all of you have built your own three-dimensional context. It may be simple, but it's foundationally what every three-dimensional context is like. And the avatars are basically the users embodied as characters within that context, right? That's really what an avatar is. And today is exciting because we will also start to take some of what we've been learning and connecting it to some of the things you may have been learning in other parts of your design journey. So this is kind of a fun little thing today. Avatars, generally they take some kind of 3D form. They don't have to. I mean, you could simply have a camera that moves through space without any physical form. But by and large, just even for orientation, for the character to know which way is forward, like you'll have some kind of physical form. Now, Epic, in its infinite wisdom, has decided that the first-person character in Unreal will be a gun. I mean, that says a lot about our society, but as the case may be, that is a physical form, for better or for worse. But you might have arms. You might, sometimes you see the hands of the character. You might, you might see something else. Now, the characters don't have to be humanoid. They could be. I mean, a lot of the metaverses we've looked at, whether stylized or not, the characters are often humanoid. But somebody shared this with me the other day. Oh, shoot, it's not a keynote. Drat. This okay, so it's not easy to share, but maybe you can go search it up. But somebody is building a metaverse for cats in Kowloon, on Kowloon Island. So you can basically be a cat and wander around the street and meet other cats and so on. I think that's brilliant. And and the user's avatar is at least generally one-to-one and persistent, at least within a single session. Like between sessions, you might change your avatar, or in theory, like you could have one person controlling multiple avatars, or vice versa, where multiple people could control a single avatar. I mean, these things can be imagined, like if you had a giant robot avatar, right? Like you could have different people controlling different parts of that robot. But in by and large, like I would say 100% of the metaverses right now, it's, you generally have a one-to-one correspondence between a user and an avatar, and generally that avatar is persistent. I do think that giving users ability to change their avatar, especially to navigate differently through space or interact differently with space, I think is particularly interesting. But as of now, no metaverses I know of kind of really do that. They might allow you to change weapons and stuff, but your avatar still persists. What I'm talking about is like, okay, if I want to fly across a city, maybe I should become a plane. And then when I get, we are so, again, there's this idea of, typically our physical form is persistent. So it's very hard for us to imagine a world where it was not. But imagine if you wanted to get across a city, you could become a plane. When you get to the other place, you could then turn back into your humanoid form, right? If you wanted to dive, maybe you could turn into a submarine, right? I mean, so in theory, you could take on different avatars to navigate the world and interact with the world in different ways, which I think is would be a very cool experience. But at least I don't know of any. Do you guys know of any metaverses or games that do that right now? Anybody in any of your favorite games or metaverses? No? Okay. So back to our core interruption. So again, you'll see these ideas coming back. I mean, we covered all of these initially, but now we are focusing on a very specific aspect of it, which is at the very basic level, all that the avatar needs to do is satisfy the core interaction loop, right? Which means the avatar needs to be able to provide the user with some kind of visual feedback about what is going on. The most common ones are, of course, a camera. Now we've seen first-person cameras, third-person cameras. You could even have a fixed camera. Guess which one is more immersive? I mean, you know this by now because you've played around with some of these ideas. Audio is the other common form of feedback from the metaverse, but certainly it's not limited to these. As we have talked about, there are other exotic, head-mounted displays and all kinds of haptic feedback, so on and so forth. But these are the basic ones, right? At the basic level, the avatar must give the user some kind of feedback that allows the user to act. And then finally, at the very least, the avatar should be capable of navigating in some way. And we'll look at an example of an avatar in a second here, which is which is mostly a navigation avatar, which is fine, right? It's like, okay, even if they can't take any actions, even the act of navigation means that you have control over the avatar, and the avatar will respond to that control through your action stream. So this is the most basic kind of, and then of course you can layer things on top of it. The avatar could have different actions they can take. They could communicate in other ways with other avatars and so on. So there's much more that can be layered on top of this, but this is sort of the core foundation. And like I said, in a second we will look at that core foundation in Unreal. Characters move according to a set of predefined rules, okay, which is kind of called a state machine. So this is a concept we'll look at in a second here. And within a state, a character moves based on some kind of an animation cycle, right? So what is an animation cycle? If a character is walking, that's an animation cycle. If a character jumps, that's an animation cycle, right? If a character runs, that's an animation cycle. A character turns. All of these very discrete actions are called animation cycles. And we used to use them in film as well, right? So in film, when we would create crowds, right? If you have a crowd of rats in Ratatouille, right? They're basically being animated using a bunch of these like animation cycles that are then, applied randomly or based on some logic to different characters in the scene. The game engine does the same thing. It takes these different animation cycles and uses this idea of a state machine and then applies the appropriate cycle to the character at the appropriate time. Okay, so let's take a look at what that actually looks like. So this is a state machine, literally from this is literally Unreal documentation about state machines. And you'll see that the way that you define a state machine in Unreal is very, very difficult. By the way, I should say before I even go much deeper into these topics is you don't, for this class and for any of the assignments, you will not need to create your own avatar. We will provide you, Unreal provides you with first person, third person avatars, which you're welcome to use as is. When we move some of your work to Falcon, which is the metaverse platform, we'll be using to do your final projects, that also has pre-existing avatars that are already set up. So you will not need to set up an avatar yourself. But I think it's good to understand how they're built, and because it is definitely an advanced topic, right? So you don't need to do it for the class, but if you're curious, of course, you're always welcome. There's lots of stuff online, and you're always welcome to dig in to whatever extent you want. But even as we start covering this material, don't worry about how you might do this yourself, because you will not need to do it for the class or for any of the assignments. But at least try to follow along kind of conceptually how an avatar works, right? So in this particular avatar, when the avatar starts animating, it's initially just in idle state. Idle state, typically the character is just standing. And if somebody was actually standing like a statue, it's actually more obvious that it's like it doesn't look right. So the character might just shift weight from one leg to the other. Maybe they're looking around here and there, right? And so we also call it keep alive, right? So that's keep alive animation, right? Because a character never stops. We as a human being, we never like completely freeze. We're still moving to some degree, even if we're not performing an action. Now in this character, right, if the player starts moving, so you start pressing, let's say the WS, typically the WS, A, and D keys on your keyboard, or represent the left joysticks up, down, and left, right movement. So I don't generally have a joystick, but almost every game will allow you to also play with the keyboard if you don't have a joystick, right? And so WS and A and D keys are like the WS is the left joystick and A and D are the right joystick. So left and right, up and down, okay? And so if the player suddenly starts moving, we want the character to respond, right? So if the player is moving along the ground, then we go into movement state. What is movement state? It's walking. The character is potentially walking, right, in some direction. And it'll basically, the character will keep walking in that, will just keep walking till suddenly, if the character is asked to jump, then you move to a different state. So this idle state was our first state. Then when the character started moving, we came out of idle state into this moving state. And then we went around, we stay in this moving state, and we keep playing that animation of the character walking till somehow the character, like the user tells the character to jump, in which case we switch to the jumping up state, right? And then we play the upward animation, right? We'll play this upward state animation. Now, if the character has jumped, right, eventually the character will land again and will start walking. Does that make sense? Right? If your character jumps, it'll be in the upward state for a little while, but then eventually, when the character's jump is over, they're back into this walking state. On the flip side, let's say the character fell off a cliff, right? They were walking, they got to the end of the world, and they fell off the edge of the world. Now they're falling down, right? And they're going to be in that falling, like maybe I'm like shaking my hands as I'm falling or whatever, but I'm now in the falling animation, right? And basically we can check, like, has the player hit ground somehow? If they've hit ground, then great, I go back to my walking. So this is an amazing character. He can jump like 8 floors, will land and immediately start walking, right? But if they haven't reached ground, then you still keep doing the falling animation. right? So these state changes can be triggered by something the user does, or it could also be triggered by the world, right? So if the character is walking and they hit a wall, maybe they have a fall down animation, right? And then once they've fallen down, then they'll stay fallen down unless the user asks the character to stand up again, right? And so each of this then becomes a state, right? And if you want to see how that state looks inside Unreal, so now this is actually from Unreal, you can see it looks very similar. So I start out, I'm in idle state, then I go into movement state, right? But if from idle state, I might be sent into up initial state, right? And then I go into a falling state, and I'll keep falling till I land, and then I go back into idle state. So this and this is the same thing, right? They represent the same thing. And when I'm in one of these states, I'm playing a specific kind of animation. All right. And so when you're playing, let's say I was playing the fall animation, and then when I suddenly hit the ground, I'm going to go back to idle state here, right? And if I do that, how does my animation transition from the fall state to the land state? And that's called a transition. And game engines have different ways of doing transitions, but a lot of it also has to do with how the character's animation is set up, and some kinds of transitions are better than others. In the example we will look at in a second, it's actually really well done transitions. Actually, they've done, sometimes you can animate the transitions to make them better, but sometimes you just have to rely on the engine doing a really good job with these transitions, right? And sometimes that can look good, or it may not look good, and you have to do more work, right? So this is basically how you build these animation cycles, okay, within Unreal. Now let's actually get a little bit more hands-on. So we're going to look at a advanced locomotion system. So this is I think it's a free avatar you can grab from the Unreal Marketplace. We haven't really talked about Marketplace. We'll talk a little bit more about it, I think, next week probably, or whenever we start our next project. But this character, right, is capable of doing. It's a very simple character, because the idea here is they're not giving you a model. The idea is you can take this character and take its skeleton and its animation and essentially what's called retarget it to your specific character. So you could make a total, a model like completely, and it will only work with a humanoid bipedal character, right? Like you can't apply this to a horse, obviously, but you could take any human and apply essentially these animations to that human. And because they've already built a whole state machine for you for this human to navigate, if you take this essentially set up and apply it to your model, suddenly your model will act in the same way, if that makes sense. Did I confuse that issue, or does it make sense what I'm saying, right? Like, although this model looks very simple, what's actually important here is how the animation works and how the states work and how that whole transition from one state to the other works. And this is a very good model for that, right? But you can apply it to whatever. So here he's like applied, he, she, they have applied it to different simple characters, but the characters could be anything you want, really, right? If that makes sense. Okay, let's take a look at this in Unreal. Okay, so that's our character. I'm going to load a different level. I don't want all this noise over here. This, by the way, as you download, assets from the marketplace, they'll look like this, complex assets. They'll be organized. People take a lot of trouble, like, to organize their assets, clean things up, explain. So anytime you download assets from the asset store, it's a good idea to read the documentation and at least understand, get familiar with. Now notice that over here, there is no, right now in my world, there is basically a light and there's a floor, and that's about it. When I start playing, what's called the game mode will bring in a player controller for me, okay? And again, I'm not going to go into the details of this because you won't really need to set all this up. But if you're wondering where the player controller is defined, if you go to your edit and project settings, and if you go into maps and modes, you will see that there is a game mode here that probably brings in, you know, my character, right? So if I go into selected game mode, spectator, so we've got a, you know, we've basically got, or you can also find it here. Sometimes people also set it here in world settings. You can see my game mode override is game mode SP. That's what is going to bring in my player. Essentially, that's going to bring in my avatar. So that's typically how an avatar is going to come into your Unreal scene, is through something like this game mode. So when I hit play, you'll suddenly see a whole bunch of other stuff shows up. But most importantly, we get this player controller, right? And you can see that this player controller has also spawned so let's edit also this. Oh, no, actually what I want is this. So this blueprint really represents my avatar. Okay. So let's actually try to edit this as well. We'll open it for editing, or we'll do that when we stop. But or here it is. I guess it opened up. But and we're going to look at this a little bit more in detail here in a second. But let's put it away for now. Okay. Let's focus on actually understanding. First, let's understand how this avatar behaves. Then there are some controls here. If you see in the window, I can't point with my mouse because it will take control away. But oh, actually, yeah. So these are some of the keys that I can use to make. So I'm pressing W right now, which causes my character to walk, or to gently run forward, right? S causes it. So if I was on a joystick, I would move. If I move my joystick up, left joystick up or down, the character would basically do that, right? If I press A key, my character moves sideways. So again, if with my joystick, and if I push both W and D, it's moving diagonally, as you would expect. If I pressed A and S, it's going to move back diagonally, right? So I can move my joystick essentially in any direction, and basically my character is going to follow my instructions, right? This is just geeking out, but you can move your character in slow motion for no apparent reason. But you know what? It's fun. Okay. And also there's a debug view. So let's take a look at that, right? So that's just going to center our view here. And also I have a camera as well, right? So if I want to move my camera around, I should be able to use the mouse. Oh, so if you notice, my camera is changing his head, like which direction he's looking in, right? So I can do that. He can look up. And now if I walk, he's going to walk looking up. And if I want to switch to the character's point of view, right, I can do that over here using, camera perspective. So C key. Why is that not working for me? PC hold C, camera perspective, tap C. Oh, and let's change our mesh. Okay. I'm not sure why because I'm in debug view, right? So here now, if you see, I'm now in the character's point of view, but I'm looking up, so it's very hard. Let me go back. So because I'm looking up, like let's try to maybe look down. So now if I switch, so now you can see I'm in the camera, I'm in first person. And you can see sometimes I might even see my character, like my legs or something, right? Which makes it very immersive. This is why it feels embodied. Like when if it's this, you might just be looking from a camera, right? But when you start seeing a little bit of the character, like it really, you get and then the sound, right, really helps you get a sense of embodiment, right? This is more of an over the shoulder kind of camera, similar to what I would call a third person, they call it over the shoulder camera, but that's same as third person. So you can switch one over one shoulder or another shoulder. And then again, if I look more straight, this would be what we would call third person, right? Inside Unreal. And then this is what we would call first person, right? Okay. I don't know what traces is. I think it just maybe shows you where the character's eye line is, I think. And then debug shapes is kind of interesting because you can also see what the collision volume. So if the character, this is a very complex character. So doing the physics of colliding this character, let's say against your environment is kind of expensive. But so often we will use a simple geometry like a capsule. And then if you see the green sphere between his legs, that's actually what's called his root. So that's actually the position of the character. And I'm not sure what the other two, the blue and red, or the cyan and red spheres are, but they appear to be previous position because it kind of catches up with him. I'm going to guess they're like his previous position. But green is sort of where this character actually is, right? Layer colors. I don't know what layer colors are. Nothing. They're nothing. Okay. Let's have some more fun with this character. So we looked at mouse movement. Yeah, we've looked at that. We looked at now to make the character jump. So now what happened here? Like which animation state am I in right now? Anybody? Which animation state do you think I'm in?
Idle.
Idle, exactly. Notice in idle state, it's very interesting, right? The character is not frozen. There's like a little bit of breathing motion going on, like there's a little bit of movement to the character, right? But I'm in idle state, nothing much is happening. And it's going around, like it's just constantly playing that animation. It's a loop. It's an animation that loops, right? So that animation is just going on and on, giving the character like a keep alive, right? Now, when I'm about to press the spacebar key, as soon as I press the spacebar key, this character's state is going to go into jumping, right? Into a different state. And it switches. So that means the character also then switches to a different animation cycle, right? And when the character starts falling down, it again changes state, right? To a different animation. So when it's going up, the character is lifting their hands. When the character is falling down, then the hands are coming down, right? And then eventually, not in response to my action, but eventually the character is going to hit the ground again. And when the character hits the ground, you see that they do a little bit of adjustment animation, which is fun too. Like notice that. And you see that they like replant themselves, and that's pretty cool. But then it switches basically back to an idle animation. Now, when I press the W key, the character is now in a moving state. And it'll just stay in the moving state as long as I press the W key, the character is going to stay in the moving state. Okay, let's see what else is. We looked at space. Crouch is fun. So if I press the Alt key, I think he crouches, which is pretty cool. Now notice from crouch, if I press the W key, it's using a different animation cycle to move. It moves, but with a different animation cycle.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Does this also work for Mac, or are you using Mac right now?
I'm using a Windows machine right now.
Right. Okay.
But have you tried, like, or is there a reason you're asking the question, Blake?
Oh no, because I had a hard time trying for a character to move, and so I thought maybe that was because I had a Mac.
Were you using the WSAD keys?
Yeah, I did,
okay.
But it wouldn't work. So.
And which character were you using?
Just the
The
default.
normal first person or third person. I mean, did anyone else have that problem? I know some of you recorded videos from your projects with a first person character, so I'm assuming it worked for you. Did anyone else have problems getting it working on a Mac? Did anyone get it working on a Mac? Like a first person, were they able to move through the space?
Yeah, mine's working fine.
Okay. So Chloe, I'm not sure why. So one thing is you have to make sure your viewport has mouse focus. Okay.
Mhm.
If your viewport doesn't have mouse focus, it's obviously not going to work because it won't get the keystrokes essentially.
Okay.
So just make sure, and again, happy to look at it together if it's
okay. Yeah, great. Thank you.
and then if I jump, so notice from a crouch, jumping up just makes the character stand, and then jumping does that, right? So and I wonder what happens if I press space and Alt. Then yeah, so if I press Alt twice, then the character does a roll, right? So now while it's doing a roll, it doesn't quite, because the roll is relatively fast, right? But you notice how it finishes the roll. The roll doesn't let you interrupt, right? So basically that particular state is only checking for a new state after the roll is finished. So how states transition, it's kind of up to the person designing this animation system, right? You can run, I guess, which is so if I want to run, I press a shift key, and now the character's running a lot faster. And then if I want to walk, I think it's the control key. So now if I walk, it's much slower. So notice how I'm able to transition between these things, okay? So here I'm walking, and as I'm walking, I'm slowing down or speeding up, right? So I'm going from a walk to a run to a sprint, right? So I can control how these transitions work essentially, because this is a very well-designed kind of animation system for the avatar. I can kind of transition between all of these things. There's a couple of different rotation modes that just let you. So here now, when I move, so in this rotation mode, see in this rotation mode, when I turned, I was turning with the character. Like, so it was like almost like a third person view. But if I move to this, then I can freely rotate. Now the camera is freed up from the character. So if I now run, although it now I have to run in the opposite direction, but I can do that, right, if I want to. So this is just a different way to control the camera. Okay, so this is just a bunch. Oh, and this is the treat at the end, is the ragdoll. So yeah, there you go. Here, let's do it again. Oh, I wonder if I can do it from crouch. I wonder if the ragdoll works from crouch. Oh, that's pretty cool. Yay. And then we all go to sleep. Awesome. Any questions? Is this how you're feeling right now? No. Any questions? No. So far? So MetaHumans is another project that I think I had shared on the streams. This is very new. This just came out in 4/26. So let's go. So in this marketplace, you can literally download a MetaHumans project. So if I and you can run it on your own machine. I think this does push the computer quite a bit. So you may have a hard time getting it to run performantly on a Mac, I suspect. But these are all different things you can get. So look, there's a Game Samurai bundle for $60. I wonder what the Game Samurai bundle gives you. So this probably has a bunch of samurai animation, I suspect. The marketplace is fun, and you could spend hours, or waste hours just looking at awesome things people have created. Here, so let's. I don't know why we're looking at the samurai one, but just we're not going to look at the whole thing, but. So this is animation that somebody's done, and you could apply this animation essentially to your own character as well, if you wanted, right? But what I wanted to show you was not that. Let's look for MetaHuman. So MetaHuman.
Question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No.
I was just wondering, are these animations copyrighted? How does it work?
No. So if you buy an asset, and some of these assets are free, by the way, and some of the highest quality assets actually are from Epic itself. So they had a game called Paragon, and at some point they just took all the assets from Paragon and made them freely available, right?
Oh.
And you can use any of them in your projects, and you don't have to pay any copyright or anything. No, none of anytime you have stuff on the marketplace, it's all meant to be what's called kit bashed. So you can essentially mix these things into your projects, reuse them in any way you want. Some of them you pay, and it's never too much. It's like, I think the most expensive things I've seen in the asset store, like maybe a couple of $100, but that's like very rare. Most things are $30, $20, $50, and you can get a lot for paying that kind of money. If you compare it to how much time it would take you to build some of those things.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to share with you is, so this project you can download and play with, and I would say this represents pretty much the state of the art right now in what an avatar can be. I think that's fair to say. And they've made it completely public, so you can see exactly how they're doing this. Oh.
Generation of digital human powered by Unreal Engine. MetaHumans are high-fidelity digital characters created by you, the user, on our new content creation platform, MetaHuman Creator. I am fully rigged, ready for animation and motion capture, allowing you to work in context. With everything running live in Unreal Engine, my motion works seamlessly
on other characters. I have 8 levels of detail and have been tested on a wide range of hardware platforms, from feature film to mobile. If you're interested in learning about my animation rig or high-fidelity deformations, built on Control Rig, the new strand-based hair system via the Groom component, or how everything is tied together and animated in Sequencer, then have a look under the hood in this project. This is just a glimpse of things to come.
So you can create your own, by the way. So in the project, they give you a couple of characters, but you can design your own characters and certainly apply your own animation to it, or you can capture animation and apply it to as well. But let's take a quick look a little bit at the documentation here. So basically, you can, the character is broken up into all the different parts, right? The body, the face, and so on. And again, as they mentioned in the video, everything is rigged up. Everything is ready for animation to be applied. And you've got a leg. You've got the skeleton mesh. The skeleton mesh is this mesh that can move with a skeleton. That's why it's called a skeleton mesh. Otherwise, if you have a box, that's called a static mesh. This is called a skeleton mesh because it's a mesh that's bound to a skeleton and will move with your character. But you might have groom and so on, right? So there's all kinds of hair, the eyelashes, the mustaches those are all called grooms. There are different shaders. So the character has a slightly different shader on the skin, right, than they have on the hair, or the lips, the eyes. So these are different shaders, and each of these parts of the character is tied to a different, is bound to a different shader, basically, a different material, if you will, right? There's also different, like a number of LODs. So what LODs allow you to do, you can have thousands of these characters in a environment. And the, if what it'll do is for the characters that are further away from the camera, it will drop the LOD down. So LOD stands for level of detail. So you can have a lot of these lower level of detail characters, but the higher level detail characters are of course more expensive, but it only switches to the higher level of detail if the character is very close to camera. And as you can imagine, at any given time, only very few characters can be close to the camera. Most of them are going to be further away from the camera. So that allows, the LOD allows the engine to be very efficient. So here you can see how this character is bound to like the kind of animation cycles we were looking at a moment ago, right? How that looks, right? We were looking at it on sort of the Unreal bipedal character, but you can see how that will look on. Now notice his sweatshirt and how like the strings of the sweatshirt are swinging with the animation. There are wrinkles, so there's actually cloth simulation going on. So, you get these wrinkles and stuff like that. So all of this is there as a part of this character setup, and all of this is there in the engine, right? This kind of shows you all the different things. So it's doing the body deformation. So it's basically doing the pose of the body first, then it's posing the face, then it's doing cloth simulation, right? And then it's doing cloth, like, basically the physics for the cloth. So this is all like kind of a sequence in which you can do these things, right? This shows you all the different facial controls that exists for her or for this particular character. The hand controls, you'd have a similar set of controls on the fingers and the hands. This is like an animation that shows you how the cloth simulation basically works, right? So this is just like relaxing the cloth based on physics, right? And then you can create these hair grooms. And again, remember, in the project, they've given you these two meta-human characters that they have already created, but they have a whole like editing program where you can design your own characters, right? And take advantage of all these templates that they've already created, all these shaders, the materials that they've created, the rigs they've created. So you can apply all of this to your own character. You don't have to use just the characters that they are providing, right? This is kind of interesting. Like you can see how the level of detail they're suggesting on which platform, like what level of detail might work. They're showing you. So this is how the character looks on Windows 64. And on a phone, the character is going to simplify quite a bit. But that's okay. I mean, the character looks pretty consistent across Windows, Xbox, and PlayStation 4. But then, of course, it's quite a bit more simplified on Android. And that's because it's using different levels of detail, at different efficiencies. Okay, so this is just so we looked at a couple of things, right? We looked at the concept of state machine and these animation cycles. Then we looked at an actual Unreal setup. Now, what we didn't look at in our Unreal setup is the logic. I'll show you in a second. But then we also looked at like where is the state of the art right now in Avatar design, at least in an engine like Unreal. Like I would say, and this probably represents the state of the art right now, right? In terms of what level of fidelity and what kind of control you can have on an Avatar, in a game engine or in a real-time character today. I wanted to show you a couple of other things in our project real quick. So I do want to show you some of these blueprints. So if I look at the, before we look at blueprints, let's actually look at a few other things. So if you look at footsteps, right, it's just got footstep sound, right? So every time the foot hits the ground, it's playing one of these things. And it's just, they've got footsteps on different kinds of material. I don't know what that is. Okay. But what I wanted to show you was animation. So there are different animations here. So there's a base animation. So let's look at a base animation for base pose. So if you look at, this is a standing, what the character's standing pose is like. It's just standing, right? It's a base pose. And this is its crouch pose, right? So these are not even moving. But then if I look at some of the locomotion poses, so let's say this is a walk, a crouch walk. So you can see this is where somebody animated this crouch walk, right? And it's a loop. If you looked at this, if you play it over and over again, you can see it doesn't look like the character stops. So the way you loop is just like a tiling image, right? You make sure that the character's last pose is the same as their first pose. And then it'll just go round and round and you don't see it stopping, right? Or if it's a run, oh, that's just the pose. But let's see if we can actually get a run cycle here somewhere. Still a pose. Yeah. So that's a run cycle, right? And we talked about transition. So this might be going from crouch to normal, I think. Yeah. So now if you went from crouch to normal and then you switched to like a keep alive, the character will never stop, right? To the user, it feels like the character actually followed their command and now is ready for the next command, right? Essentially.
All of the transition animations pre-built in, or are any of them generated?
So most of the transition animation, so if you don't provide a transition animation, the engine will do something called just interpolation for you in terms of the joint positions. And unfortunately, that doesn't look great, right? So if there's small changes in the pose, that might work. But when you've got big changes like going from crouch to standing, if you let the engine just do it, it's just going to look really bad, essentially, right? So that's why when people care, so sometimes people say like in a game, the character feels real, like the motion feels really good. It's because somebody took a lot of trouble creating a lot of these cycles rather than just procedurally like switching between them. Then you'll feel that the character is actually behaving really, really nicely. And if you don't do it, then it's not going to look great. So this, I love this one because it's like, yay. This doesn't make any sense, but yeah, okay. And then the last thing I want to show you here is blueprints. Specifically, I want to show you character logic. So this is what it takes to build all the transitions in a state machine like that, right? So on landed, so these are all the different conditions that they're handling. Like on landed, temporarily increase the braking friction on land to make landing more accurate or trigger a brake fall. On jump, set the new in-air rotation to the velocity rotation if your speed is greater than 100. So obviously it takes a lot of work to build a really nice, seamless avatar system like this. But what's nice is you can start from something like this. So event on start crouch, right? On start crouch, it basically changes, on stance change, right? It's changing the stance to crouching, right? So it's changing out what the animation state is. So in response to the different actions, right? So event set movement state, right? So if on movement state changed, you can do different, you go into different like states, essentially, right? And they're handling all these different, like, okay, when I transition in a specific gait, so if I was walking and I transition, it looks a certain way. If I'm running and I transition, it looks different. So you can imagine, of course, that there is a lot, to build these systems, there's a lot to think about, If you don't do those things, it's okay, right? Like your system will still work, it just won't look that great, right? So in the avatars we were using, the default avatars that came, as a first person or a third person in Unreal, it doesn't have this sophisticated logic for transitions and stuff. It still works, right? You can still move the character. But if you really want to move the character in a way that feels physically realistic, then you need to build a pretty nice state machine like this, and build all the animation cycles and all the transitions between them. The good news is, if
Is it just me or is he frozen?
He's frozen for me.
Same.
Okay.
if you get somebody who's built one, am I still frozen?
Oh no, you're good now.
No. Okay. Any questions on this, the Unreal part of this, before we go back to slides?
I tried the whole event interaction thing, and I know that there was kind of like, there's this icon that kind of looked like a bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what was that for.
I'm sorry, are you talking about inside an Unreal scene, or?
Yeah, it's an Unreal. In where, what's it called? Am I just being confusing?
I'm sorry, Ben, it's a little hard for me to hear. Can you say that again?
Oh, I just don't know how to say it. Never mind.
Okay, just email me, right? And send me a screen grab or something. Yeah?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So personalization is coming back to sort of a little bit our own, coming back a little bit more to the metaverse side of things, right? So obviously, personalization is a great way to allow users to modify their avatar and make them sort of uniquely their own, right? It can be done kind of inside a character editor. So this thing you see below is like in a racing game, you'll often have like a shop where you can go and like modify your car, or a character, you can give them different skin and clothing, and then you've kind of created your avatar, right? So sometimes you have these sort of character editors essentially, or avatar editors that are distinct from the game. But sometimes you edit, your character may transform through the gameplay. Like a simple example would be maybe they got a scar, right? Or maybe they had their hands blown off or something, right? Like the character could evolve through the game as well and change kind of their appearance over time. Like you could win badges and stuff like that. I mean, that's another way. Like you can actually have a certain piece of costume or something that you can only get if you master certain aspects of the game, right? I think the ability to carry these personalizations across metaverses would be pretty fantastic, because people put a lot of time and energy into customizing these avatars and making them very personalized. But today, like you can't, it's like saying that, oh, if you have a social network in Facebook, you can't take it anywhere else, right? Because you're locked in. And it's a little bit like that right now, unfortunately, with these avatars, is they're locked into specific platforms. And what would be great is to be able to make them interoperable, so that at the end of the day, it's your avatar. You personalize it, you put a bunch of work into it. Why can't you take it into another game or into another metaverse, right? So this is where it sort of connects to some of our design work, right? So personas are also used extensively in design research, right? To talk about like, who is the user, what are their likes and dislikes, how would they like to use your application? Now, when you're talking about personas for the metaverse, it goes to a whole nother level, because it's not only who is your user in terms of in the real life, but what is the persona they want to be in their imagined life, right? So you're almost dealing with this persona at two levels, right? And that can be really fun. Like think about, I mean, I don't know if most of you have done at least some design research work. Raise of hands or whatever. Yeah. Have most of you done at least some design research work or not really? Nope. It's worth learning about. And there are lots of people, lots of classes at CCA you can take about design research. Highly recommended. Oh, I have Phil. Yeah, great. Oh, look, Matteo is saying that somebody can like swap in Cruise too. You can swap between avatars. That's pretty awesome. But yeah, so design research, I highly recommend, taking that while you're at CCA. Take advantage of taking that class, because it'll really help you improve all your work. Because at the end of the day, as a commercial artist, you are working for somebody. Even if you're designing a product, you're designing the product for a user. So understanding who your user is extremely important. Now, when you're designing for the metaverse, it's like not only do you have to understand who your user is, but also potentially what is the imagined personality of your user, right? Which can be a very fun exercise. So this is just some stuff from Duality, some of the work we've done on design research, where this person, Beth, might actually be like a nurse by day, but she loves playing construction simulator. Like, so we've created this persona, right, of someone who has a very cautious job, but so then, in their spare time, in their free time, they like to basically like, be in a very different sort of skill set, right? Or you might have somebody who maybe flies drones in the day, but then also wants to do drone racing at night, right? In their spare time. And so understanding who the persona is, both in terms of who is playing the persona and then what is the persona itself, can be a very interesting design exercise, essentially. And that's about all I had. Assignments. So you should be on your prim levels. You should have already added, you've already created your prim levels. I believe all of you have turned it in at this point. Anybody not turned it in?
Oh, I haven't turned it in because I was having like a rough time like moving some objects. But
okay,
I'll make the video like later.
Okay. Oh, I lost my class stream. Why did I lose my? Okay, I need to check and see if everyone else has turned it in. Anybody else? So for this week, what you want to do is add some dynamics to your scene, right? And there are 3 ways you can do that. Some of you have reached out to me with questions, so good for you. And so if you have questions, please reach out. But there are 3 ways. The easiest way is to add physics. I will even accept if you have a cube or something that is floating in the air, it has gravity on it, and you show me that you at least got the cube to fall under gravity, I will accept that as movement in the scene. Of course, that's not super creative. I mean, you could do more. You could bang, as your character moves, it could push things aside. So you can think creatively how you might want to go about some of that. But physics will probably be the easiest kind of dynamics you can add or interaction you can add to your scene. But then the other more fancy ways that you can try to animate, right? You can actually add some animation to things. Or probably the most complicated would be to use a blueprint, similar to some of the stuff that we showed in class, to try and set up some blueprint movement or interaction, right? And the blueprint interaction is very flexible. You could do anything. You could change the color of things as a character moves through. You could do all kinds of things, right? So that's what's due this Friday. So that's probably what you should be working on, right? And then the last part of this project is going to be to add lighting and materials. Some of you've already done that. That means you are ahead of where you need to be. Those who haven't, then you have another week to get all that wrapped up. After we finish this lighting material part of the assignment, we'll stop this project, and then we'll take everything you've learned and then actually get to build a much more creative level using marketplace assets. So remember, in this exercise, I forced you to use very simple shapes because I wanted you to really focus on the foundational stuff and the learning. In the next, you can get much more creative because you'll be able to bring in all kinds of different different assets, which you've either modeled yourself or that you can get from the marketplace. I don't want you to spend money, just get free assets. There's so plenty to pick from. Or if you search on the internet, there's a bunch of models you can find for free and you can import them into the game engine, right? Any questions on homework? All good? Fantastic. So I think that, Phil, I think you had a question for me, so I'll stay on, but everyone else is welcome to drop off. A quick question, did we ever get, no, so we didn't get Eva today, I think. Yes? No, okay. Sounds good. And please sign up again, or send email. Do not hesitate to ask questions. Varen, you are a devil today, which is awesome. A mint devil. But what does your screen say? I can't quite read what it says.
I also can't see.
Says, add at the Daniel Show 22 for more filters.
Oh, excellent. Okay. A plug right there. Thank you very much. And Phil, you're going to stay on, right?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Tara, if you want to stay on, you can stay on or drop off. It's really up to you. And see you all Friday. We have a guest speaker, awesome guest speaker, Max, who's building, he's got a virtual reality company right now to do escape rooms. Now, I will warn you, Max told me he just had a baby, and he had warned me that, he may opt out if he's too busy. But I'll see if somebody from his team can join. Otherwise, or maybe I'll look for a backup speaker. But anyway, the plan right now is for talking about a very immersive kind of metaverse experience, with an escape room. So that's the plan for Friday. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.